Alright, so I got about knee deep into this project, decided to start filming it. So, take him, I'm going to show you what I did first. Alright, so started out 94 Sea-Doo GTS, trimmed out the hull, back up a little bit, trimmed out the hull. This transom area right here, it was boxed in on these three sides. Cut it clean off, ended up sanding it down to where that fiberglass would be kind of sort of enough flush. Line that up with my boat back here. Obviously, this part was in. What I did was I found center from my transom, and you can tell underneath here where these little runners are on each side. I verified my center on the transom and from those two runners back there. Found middle, figured out how much I wanted to cut width-wise as far as my ski tunnel back here goes, and started cutting. All right, then I drilled 22 holes on each side of the fiberglass through here. They're 1.5 inches apart. Why 1.5 inches and why 22? I don't know. It felt good. Line that up with my boat here, and I've got these holes, these 1/4 inch holes drilled right here. The space between the aluminum and the fiberglass is kind of more of a V shape than this boat is. So I ended up making some spacers that'll line right up for both sides, so I don't have too much pull whenever I go to bolt these things together, and that's what I'm going to try to do today. I got that far and realized I wasn't putting washers on these things. So, back up a little bit and we'll get those on there. So let me explain a little bit better about how I got this thing centered and how I got it all, what I figured out in my brain, the best way to do it. So I cut the hole out of the ski, and I found center right there. You might be able to see that little chalk line. I found center of the front of the ski, and on the back you can kind of see that chalk line right through there. Found that line, went center all the way around 360, which will be the bottom side that you can't see and this top side right here. I measured, I did an X pattern somehow, I can't remember, it's been a few weeks ago, and it all verified. It all kind of came back telling me that I did actually find the true center. So this blue chalk line right here, hopefully once everything gets bolted down, it'll get pulled to center. And as far as the boat goes, like I said earlier, I found center on the underside of the boat, and I measured that so many times. These two rivets right here, these end up coming out, but from all my measurements, dead center of those two rivets is dead center of the boat. And I'm hoping once all 44 of these stupid things get snugged down, that it'll get pulled in and it'll kind of sit right in the middle there, and it's pretty close as it is. And so right in through here, you can see where that little spacer is in between the hole and the fiberglass. It runs all the way down, all the way up to the front, but you can kind of see how big a gap that is. That'll hopefully won't put too much stress on the hole. I'm also taking a look with you guys. I mean, this is the first time I've had all the bolts in this thing. This is the first time I've actually gotten to take a real good look at it. Yeah, and back through here, this is where my tunnel's coming out, and I did a whole bunch of work. I mean, I measured so many times and cut so many times. This shape right here for my ride plate, which is right here. I'll get that up there, show you what it looks like here in a minute. Just kind of looking at everything, looking at where the hole for the that prop shaft's going to come through, and if you look straight down, I'll zoom you in there, it's pretty well lined up with the V on the boat. You can't really see that in there, right in there, that spine or whatever you really want to call it. I don't really know boat terms all that well. I'm kind of just here. And this is my ride plate. You can see that outline on the aluminum. I did quite a bit of work. I wanted to get that as close as I could. But this ride plate, zoom you out, sits nice and flush. I cut it off on both sides here, this ride plate. It went up, it tapered up all the way to the front, and I just cut that out. And what I did with these little sections that used to be there, I bolted them in back into the fiberglass. So this right here, that square piece, that's the spacer that I added, and up here sticking out, that's where the ride plate got cut off, and it has two bolts on either side, and I just bolted and caulked it in and just kept it up there. And the ride plate, hopefully it won't cavitate too much. So that's what it looks like from the bottom side. Pretty gnarly looking, if you ask me. But the purpose of bolting this thing in today is so I can start on what I'm going to call a skid plate, and it's going to go between the fiberglass, or it's going to cover the fiberglass, and it's going to tie in to the hole. What my idea is is I'm going to take this spine and kind of just drill those rivets out and get it out of the way and get some aluminum plate, lay it out. I'll start out with cardboard, obviously. And my idea is the skid plate is going to cover the fiberglass. It's going to go outside each row of bolts. And my idea is to have it stop somewhere in here, wherever the pickup, maybe up here where the taper is. Maybe I'll taper it, I don't know. Brain fart. Yeah, aluminum plate, bolts. Cut it out to where it's kind of like a U shape almost, to where it's solid up here, and then it follows this form of the fiberglass, because obviously that's got to be open. But I'll come on the outside of either row of bolts, and hopefully if I have a big enough piece of aluminum, I can be able to patch this up. It's where the drain plug used to go. And this is the top up here. I kind of left everything as it was whenever I cut it out of the hole itself. I'm going to end up using nylocks on top of all these. I just got regular plain Jane nuts just to kind of make it easier on me for bolting this thing together and taking it back apart, because I know I'm going to end up doing that several times before this is all said and done and the final iteration gets bolted and sealed together. Even back here, I've got the steering lines, and they're not drilled out through the aluminum yet. I think this is steering. This has something to do with the water pickup or evacuation, something like that, where those pickups sit down in there, and I'll have to get something else figured out for that. Motor mounts. So originally I was going to go in much closer to where I'm cut out in here. I ended up going a little bit further out than I originally intended to, just because I really don't know how much torque that Sea-Doo motor is going to have. I left the original motor mounts in there, and I left myself a little bit extra fiberglass on both ends so I can trim that off if I need. And I'm going to start getting ahead of myself. I'm really not even there yet, so I'm just going to shut up right here, and hopefully the next thing you see is going to be this thing turned over, and we'll start making a skid plate. So here it is, bolted in. It came together pretty good. It didn't warp too much. Did a lot better than I thought it was going to do, to be honest with you. Anyway, so today, I think what I'm going to try to do is cut this spine off right here, and here's where the original piece that followed the whole length of the boat. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the spine, and I'm going to cut this down to where I've got about 8 inches or so, I think is what I measured, to cover the fiberglass. So this is the concept here. I'm going to cut this one out. I'm going to cut the top one, the one that's got that bevel on the back. I'm going to cut it same position. And then, because I'm going to need this to sit down with the boat, starting here, I'm going to cut up and over and just leave that little bit of protection. And this little piece right here that's going to be left is going to sit on top of my skid plate. And as far as that skid plate goes, I did some measuring. It's not going to be too big of a piece as I thought it was going to be. We're going to go 6 inches out from the tunnel on either side. And that's just so I can cover up this old drain plug hole. The other side doesn't really have anything, but if anything, we'll give it a little bit extra protection. I'm going to come all the way up. I'm going to stop right in through here. better look at the idea. So we'll start right here at the fiberglass, and we'll cut up, I think about a little bit over a 1/2 inch, and over just the length of that piece, just enough to where this section up here will be flush with the hole, and we can rivet it in. And there's another hole in here in the hole I can drill through and rivet it in. And before I do all that, I may go ahead and cut this out, but I do need to get going on that skid plate. It's going to tie the hole and the fiberglass together, and its main purpose is going to be as a ramp and to seal off the front here, front of the fiberglass. So the idea is, behind this parchment paper, since the hull of the boat, can't really see it anymore, since it's bowed up in the center, my measurements, I'm assuming, are going to be a little bit skewed because this is kind of crowned now. So I took this parchment paper and I marked the center of all my bolts, because whenever I go to put the skid plate on, the measurements may vary a little bit whenever this thing isn't, I guess, under pressure, so it's not being forced into any specific shape. So what I'm going to do is, rather than just trust the parchment or just trust my actual measurements, I'm going to compare the two and see where they lay, and then I'll make my decision off of there. So I'm coming out to these blue lines on either side of the parchment paper. And all these rivet holes I can do from the top side, so I'm not worried about marking those. I just want to see where my skid plate's going to begin and how it's going to bolt in through everything, because really these bolts are going to be more critical up to about this section right through here, because this alone, these two sides all the way down, that's going to be watertight. This little square area right here is where I'm going to have to be concerned with as far as waterproof. So my skid plate is going to come from the front, and it's going to come about 8 inches back or so, and it's going to come across, and it's going to stop right here. And then this section that's cut out is going to be empty, and my skid plate, where it went across right here, is going to continue on either side of the pickup. At least that's the plan.